Well, good afternoon, everybody, and welcome to the George Washington University for this wonderful celebration. My name is Dr. Jeffrey Ackman. I'm the Vice President for Health Affairs and Dean of the School of Medicine and Health Sciences, and it's really an honor to be here with you today on this very special occasion as Dr. Kevin A. Pelphrey is installed as the inaugural Carbonell Family Professor in Autism and Neurodevelopmental Disorders. The installation of faculty members into endowed professorships is a great moment in the life of any university, and we're delighted that you're here to be part of this event. Today we highlight the importance of endowed positions in the world of medical education. We celebrate the philanthropy of Michelle and Nelson Carbonell that made this occasion possible, the vision of internationally recognized neuroscientist and the Vice President for Research, Leo Chalupa, who created this vision for an Autism Institute at GW, to the Simons Foundation, who funds Dr. Pelphrey's research, and of course, Dr. Kevin Pelphrey as he builds the GW Autism and Neurodevelopmental Disorders Institute that is focused on improving our understanding of the root causes of autism spectrum disorders, developing tools for accurate diagnosis and treatments with a focus on getting the right treatment to the right person at the best time, and informing policies that address the complex issues facing the autism spectrum disorder community, particularly those relevant to young people living with autism as they transition into adulthood. As he establishes a world-class collaborative hub for translational research, he is also committed to improving the lives of patients while advancing the entire field of patient care. He and his team will employ cutting-edge technology to provide each patient with individualized care. Parenthetically, one of his first tasks in his newly endowed chair is to give one of the med school's endowed lectures this Saturday for Alumni Reunion Weekend, where he gives the Frank N. Miller Lecture, named for one of the school's great teachers. So without further ado, it's my honor to introduce President Stephen Knapp, who became the 16th president of the George Washington University in August 2007. His priorities include enhancing the university's partnerships with neighboring institutions, expanding the scope of its research, strengthening its worldwide community of alumni, enlarging its student opportunities for public service, and leading its transformation into a model of urban sustainability. Ladies and gentlemen, please join me in welcoming the 16th president of the George Washington University, Stephen Knapp.
Thanks very much, Jeff. And ladies and gentlemen, really I'm delighted to join the Dean and welcome you to this important event. And let me start by saying on behalf of all of us how deeply grateful I am to Nelson, Michelle, and the Carbonell family for their vision and generosity in endowing this professorship. I think all of us in this room know that this is an issue of important personal interest to the Carbonell family, but you may not all be aware of the many years of leadership that they have provided for the volunteer community in responding to the needs of persons living with autism, and the fact that their latest sign of that commitment is the establishment of a professorship in the field right here at Mr. Carbonell's alma mater is something of which we're very proud and we're very honored to receive it. So it really is a wonderful occasion we've been looking forward to since we started talking about creating this institute really a number of years ago, and a lot of thought and planning has gone into it, but to see it come to fruition in this extraordinary way is very gratifying. We have many distinguished guests this afternoon. I'd like to extend a special welcome to George Washington trustees Wes Burnett, Madeline Jacobs, Jay Katzen, and Cynthia Steele Vance, Trustee Emeritus Mark Hughes. If there are any other trustees who have arrived that I haven't seen, please let me know. Wave your hands. I think I got everybody. Thank you. And our guest speaker, distinguished guest speaker, Dr. Gerald Fishbach. Dr. Pelphrey's wife, Ann Chalmers Pelphrey, his parents, Kevin and Joyce Pelphrey, and his father and mother-in-law, Norman and Rebecca Chalmers, have also joined us. Welcome to you all. Today's ceremony carries on a tradition that dates back more than 500 years when Lady Margaret Beaufort, the Countess of Richmond and mother of King Henry VII, endowed professorships of divinity at the universities of Oxford and Cambridge. In 1546, Henry VIII established the Regius professorships at the same two universities, this time in 5 subjects: divinity, civil law, Hebrew, Greek, and physics. But the last of those was not what we today know as physics. It really corresponded to what we now know as the field of medicine. Later, private individuals joined in endowing professorships such as the Lucasian Chair in Mathematics, which Isaac Newton assumed in 1669. The oldest endowed professorship at the George Washington University, the Congressional Professorship, dates back to 1832, when it was created by an act of the United States Congress. We need to get Congress to do more of those again here. We haven't had one of those in a while. Tradition that somehow lapsed. The second oldest, the Elton Professor of Mental and Moral Philosophy, was an 1872 bequest by Romeo Elton of Exeter, England. This afternoon, we're delighted to continue this tradition with the installation of Dr. Kevin Pelphrey as the Carbonell Family Professor in Autism and Neurodevelopmental Disorders. Dr. Pelphrey is a pioneering neuroscientist and a world leader in autism research. His work is focused on developing biologically based tools for the detection, classification, and treatment of autism spectrum disorders. He was recruited by George Washington in March 2016 to build an institute that would address a neglected group of people on the autism spectrum, adults living with the disorder, as you heard, and youth transitioning to adulthood, as you heard from the dean. As the founding director of the Autism and Neurodevelopmental Disorders Institute, he's charged with connecting 6 George Washington schools with clinical partners at the GW University Hospital, Children's National Health System, and the GW Medical Faculty Associates. Working with the more than 60 faculty members who actively are engaged in the field of autism, we are confident Dr. Pelphrey will quickly establish our new institute as a world-class research and treatment center. Before coming to GW, Dr. Pelphrey served as the Harris Professor in the Yale Child Study Center and Professor of Psychology at Yale University. In fact, he was the youngest faculty member ever to obtain tenure and endowed professorship in the Yale School of Medicine. His work there focused on preparing scientists for independent careers as field-leading investigators, conducting advanced research on childhood neuropsychiatric disorders. He has held faculty appointments at the University of North Carolina, Duke University, and Carnegie Mellon University. Dr. Pelphrey is a prolific researcher who has co-authored nearly 100 scholarly articles. He currently holds 7 active research grants, including a $15 million National Institutes of Health Award from the Autism Centers of Excellence program. He's a member of the Scientific Advisory Board at the Autism Science Foundation, a public member of the National Institutes of Health Interagency Autism Coordinating Committee, and a member of the Review Committee for the National Science Foundation's Cognitive Neuroscience program. Dr. Pelphrey's work has been recognized through numerous awards and accolades, including the Scientist Career Development Award for the National Institutes of Health, the John Merck Scholars Award, and the American Psychological Association's Boyd McCandless Award for distinguished early career theoretical contributions to developmental psychology. He received his bachelor's degree from North Carolina State University, a PhD in child psychology from the University of North Carolina at Chapel Hill, and he was a postdoctorate fellow in neuroscience at Duke University. This brief summary of his career gives you some indication of why we are so pleased and proud this afternoon to install Dr. Pelphrey as the inaugural Carbonell Family Professor in Autism and Neurodevelopmental Disorders. And it's now my pleasure to invite Dr. Forrest Maltzman, Provost and Executive Vice President for Academic Affairs, to say a few words. Forrest.
Thank you, President Knapp. I'm delighted to join you this afternoon to install Dr. Kevin Pelphrey as the inaugural Carbonell Family Professor in Autism and Neurodevelopmental Disorders. The Carbonell Family Professorship in Autism and Neurodevelopmental Disorders at GW will enhance Dr. Pelphrey's ability to seek breakthroughs in clinical treatments on the full spectrum of autism and for all individuals, including adults with autism, a rarely covered age range in the field. Although today is really a celebration of the advances that Kevin has made and will continue to make as a Carbonell Family Professor, I'd also like to take this opportunity to recognize and thank GW Board of Trustee Chair Nelson Carbonell and his wife Michelle, whose generosity made this professorship possible. In 1996, Nelson and Michelle's 2-year-old son Dylan was diagnosed with autism spectrum disorder. This diagnosis began a hopeful but often frustrating journey as they grappled with the questions of how they would provide their son with a healthy and meaningful life. And even though I have no doubt that the challenge has been significant, and even though I am sure Dylan, like everyone with his diagnosis, can find the world to be a difficult place to navigate at times, Nelson and Michelle have ensured that Dylan's talents and abilities are recognized. Today, he is a student at Exceptional Minds, an incredible institution that teaches animation skills to those on the autism spectrum. Fortunately for others, neither Nelson nor Michelle was content to address the challenges of autism for their family alone. Instead, they view the diagnosis as a challenge to help others with their own autism challenges. They have done this with the generosity of their talent, time, and resources. Michelle is the immediate past chair of the National Capital Area chapter of Autism Speaks, where she has served on the board since 2008 and is the co-founder of the Nelson and Michelle Carbonell Family Foundation. Michelle earned a double BS degree in both electrical and biomedical engineering from Duke, before we even had a BS in biomedical engineering, and then an MBA from another institution in town that will remain nameless. I think it's safe to say that the Carbonell's connection and love of this university stems from the school's role in Nelson's life. Nelson earned his bachelor's degree in electrical engineering from the GW School of Engineering and Applied Sciences in 1985 and was inducted into the school's Hall of Fame in 2011. He is founder, chairman, and CEO of Nelson Carbonell & Associates, a Reston, Virginia-based firm which specializes in strategic planning, business financing, IT strategy, and leadership development. He recently began his second 3-year term as the chair of the GW Board of Trustees, and before that he was vice chair for, I think, 6 years. Nelson has done so much in his leadership role on the board. It is clear that everything he does stems from his love of the university. In his role of chair, I appreciate that Nelson is someone who is willing to listen and advise GW students, faculty, and staff, including myself. Michelle and Nelson are trailblazers and game changers in everything they have done. I don't think it is a secret to anyone in this room how much Michelle and Nelson have given to or care about this university. In addition to supporting the Autism Institute, funding Kevin's position, and providing scholarships for our students, Nelson and Michelle have put a tremendous amount of sweat equity into making GW a better place. There are few, if any, friends of this university who have given more resources and time to making GW great than Nelson and Michelle. In addition to their son, Dylan, the Carbonells have 3 daughters, Roxana, Carmen, and Sophia. And again, I want to thank Nelson and Michelle for this transformative gift. If President Knapp, Dean Ackman, and Chair and Mrs. Carbonell could join me on stage, I'd like to present you with the Carbonell Family Professor Medallion. We're going to go here and there.
That's the video camera. We're on video.
Okay. Yeah, now you're.
Your turn to show your video.
Oh, with the video.
Yeah. So what's it on?
Okay, I'm sorry.
Right.
Great. Thank you, Forrest, for those kind words. Thanks, President Knapp, for your introduction. This is a very emotional day for us. While I am used to public speaking, Michelle refuses to do so. But I am I've been asked many times to talk about this story, and I have to say that I never get through it. So rather than having you watch me cry, which is fine by me, we put a short video presentation together to tell our story. So we'll take it away now.
Well, thank you, Nelson, Michelle. A lot of thoughts in my mind. I just think about the effect of stigma on so many levels, how that affects the parents, the family, the siblings, the educational system, the medical care, the healthcare system, the research environment, the funding for the disease, the illnesses. The stigma, it's unbelievable. It's pernicious, it's undermining, it's destructive, and but we persevere, and thank you for inspiring video. So part of what's so special about today is not only Michelle and Nelson's story about Dylan, but that we are naming Dr. Pelphrey as the leader you mentioned in the video who will help autistic adults enter the world and provide support to your family and others on their journey. So thank you for your generosity and for helping other families who face these same challenges. Next, I'd like to introduce you to our invited speaker, Dr. Gerald Fischbach. Dr. Fischbach is a world-renowned physician, neuroscientist, whose research has centered on the formation and maintenance of synapses, or the connection between the nerve cells and their targets, through which information is transmitted in the nervous system. He pioneered the use of nerve cell cultures to study the electrophysiology, morphology, and biochemistry of developing nerve, muscle, and interneuronal synapses, with a particular interest in the neuromuscular junction. He currently serves as the chief scientist of the Simons Foundation and fellow of the Simons Foundation. Dr. Fischbach joined the Simons Foundation in 2006 to oversee the Simons Foundation Autism Research Initiative, a scientific initiative with the mission of understanding diagnosis and treatment of autism spectrum disorders by funding innovative research of the highest quality and relevance. It's at the Simons Foundation where Dr. Pelphrey and Dr. Fischbach became friends and colleagues because of their shared commitment to the study of autism, particularly in bridging the gap between genes and cognition. Under Dr. Fischbach's leadership as the director of the Simons Foundation Autism Research Initiative, hundreds of researchers have received awards as Simons investigators, including many whom were attracted from other fields into autism research. Dr. Fischbach also developed a collaborative research community through annual meetings and workshops on topics such as genetics, pretty much all aspects of brain science and clinical matters. To help those and other autism researchers understand the role of spontaneous or de novo mutations in the disorder, Dr. Fischbach spearheaded the creation of two exceptional resources: the Simons Simplex Collection, which is a repository of genetic and phenotypic data and corresponding biospecimens from nearly 3,000 autism simplex families, and Safari.org, a pivotal resource in accelerating the creation of the growing community of scientists working in the area of autism spectrum disorders. Today, in his role as chief scientist and fellow of the Simons Foundation, he contributes to all of the Foundation's scientific endeavors, including its life sciences and mathematics and physical sciences division, as well as Safari. He initiates new collaborative projects in neuroscience research and is a key advisor to the Foundation's education and research programs. In addition to the Simons Foundation, Dr. Fischbach has held high-ranking leadership positions at several prestigious institutions. He served as the Vice President and Dean of Health and Biomedical Sciences and Dean of the Faculties of Health Sciences at Columbia University in New York. He was Director of the National Institute of Neurological Disorders and Stroke at the NIH. He also served as the Edison Professor of Neurobiology and head of the Department of Anatomy and Neurobiology at Washington University School of Medicine, as well as the Nathan Marsh Pusey Professor of Neurobiology and Chairman of the Neurobiology Departments of Harvard Medical School and Mass General Hospital. He's the past president of the Society of Neuroscience, serves on several medical and scientific boards, and is a member of the National Academy of Sciences, the American Academy of Arts and Sciences, and the Institute of Medicine. He's a fellow of the American Academy of the Advancement of Science and a former non-resident fellow of the Salk Institute. Please join me in welcoming Dr. Gerald Fischbach.
Thank you, Ken. Thank you very much, Ken. Are there any questions after that? Wonderful introduction. You know, it's harder to give a 10-minute talk than an hour talk, but I'm going to try. First, I want to say I was stunned by that video. It was the most moving statement. I get choked up just thinking about it. It's wonderful. Nelson and Michelle. I became aware, more aware than you would guess, when I was director of autism, when I was director of NINDS about 1998. But the field was kind of grim then. There were not terrific researchers in it. Very little progress had been made. There was growing awareness that this is becoming a major problem in this country and worldwide. But no one had grabbed the disease by the throat and started shaking it and saying, what is really going on here? So we worked very hard at the NIH. It was not an orphan disease for sure, but there really were no insights. The genetics was weak. And frankly, the scientific community was about average. When I left the NIH and ended up at the Simons Foundation, we had two important missions. One was to explore the genetics of the disorder as one way to get a good handle on the disorder. But the second most and even more important mission was to recruit the best people in neuroscience to the field of autism research. And that's when I really became aware of Kevin Pelphrey. He was one of the first people recruited and has been one of the most successful, the one who has made me the proudest of the work I'm doing now. We have learned a lot about the genetics. When in 2006, when I joined the Simons Foundation, there was one gene, one genetic variant, which we knew for sure increased the risk for autism. Now, because of the Simons simplex collection that Ken mentioned, there are more than 95 sure risk factors for autism affecting synapses, affecting the immune system, and affecting a number of other systems, which now give us the groundwork to start thinking about what they are doing. So despite this success, the real challenge lies ahead. And here's where Kevin is absolutely critical. The question is, what is the link between these genetic variants and behavior and the brain? That is a mystery which we must solve in the coming years. And I do want to say, we and you should never, ever, ever give up hope about solving that question. And by solving it, finding new insights in how we can alter that behavior. This is not a science presentation, but I just want to illustrate Kevin's research with two recent articles that he wrote, which have impressed me enormously. One was an imaging study he did on the Simons simplex collection, where he compared children on the spectrum. It's called simplex because there's one and only one child on the spectrum. Neither parent and none of the other siblings have been diagnosed with autism. And Kevin did find very important and interesting deficits in the brains of children on the spectrum, and helped to find what we now call the social brain. And I won't go into the details of what regions of the brain were hypoactive in autistic children when challenged with socially relevant tasks. But one thing Kevin did do is he found that the unaffected, clinically unaffected siblings also had deficits in the same areas. They had not risen to the level of diagnosis, but there was something there which said there was something shared. And that woke me up and many other people up, that this problem is more pervasive than these diagnoses would indicate. Also, the thing that really was incredible, he found that the unaffected siblings had areas of activity of the brain which were not found in neurotypical controls, not members of the family. And the thought that occurred to him, which I think really revolutionized my thinking about it, was maybe these are compensatory areas. The reason this child, who had some traits of autism in his MRI, could compensate because of these other areas in the brain. And to me, that remains one of the most promising areas of investigation. Challenging, to be sure. Many people do not, with good reason, many IRBs, institutional review boards, do not want to push the research that is called for here because it involves minor but really invasive explorations of a child with autism. I have the feeling that many parents would welcome such interventions, but our society is cautious, justifiably. The other paper which is relevant and related is a study of something called the, quote, love hormone, oxytocin, which in many, many animal studies and in people seem to improve the empathy and affiliation of individuals. And Kevin, again, by his brilliant imaging work, this is not just typical MRI, very quantitative and careful imaging, rarely reproduced, found that oxytocin did produce effects even before they were clinically evident. And he raised the question of plasticity in the brain, a subject I'm very well acquainted with. And he found that he predicts that this is a learning experience, that oxytocin will open the door. It will not cure immediately, but will open the door to learn behaviors that can be modified. So these two studies typify for me the quality of experiments and thinking that is Kevin Pelphrey. Michelle and Nelson, you have done a wonderful thing with this endowed chair. It really opens up so many things that an individual can do in these difficult times when many people are running away from brain research and many drug companies are closing down their programs because it's difficult, it's hard. And this type of support will allow Kevin to thrive and to influence the next generation. You could not have picked a better person. In addition to his science, he is a leader in the community. He is a creative person. Not every rigorous science is creative, but I hope the examples I gave you show how he thinks generally. He's generous with his time. Kevin, Ruth, my wife, thanks you for the time you've spent with her, helping her with bioethical questions. And I believe he's inspiring. I'll tell you a story that Seymour Benzer wrote to me when I was a very young, tenured professor. He wrote to me, congratulated me, and he reminded me that tenured professors have an average life expectancy of 4 years. So it's good that you're young and make the use of it. And we all have to think about how we can help and stick with this problem. It's hard. There are many frustrated, disappointed, angry people there, but we're really at the dawn of major, major breakthroughs, and Kevin will be in the forefront. Thanks.
Thank you, Dr. Fischbach, for your remarks, very kind remarks about Kevin and also your own incredibly important contributions to science. Now I invite my colleagues and friends, Dr. Pelphrey, Chairman and Mrs. Carbonell, President Knapp, and Provost Maltzman, to join me at the front of the room for the installation. Thank you.
So what I'll do is
I'll come around.
put you right here if I could. I'll line up next to you there. We can line up everybody else. Well, let me begin by saying that how much I think we're all moved by the video, and also how much we appreciated the very eloquent and actually informative remarks from Dr. Fischbach. So, and it is now my pleasure, on behalf of the trustees and the faculty of the George Washington University, formally to install Dr. Kevin Pelphrey as the Carbonell Family Professor in Autism and Neurodevelopmental Disorders. And I will confer the medal that is the sign of that office. All right, get it straightened out. There we go. Congratulations.
Thank you.
Photo over here.
Pose for a photo.
There's our camera person.
We'll just swing all the way around.
Ladies and gentlemen, I give you the Carbonell Family Professor, Dr. Kevin Pelphrey.
Thank you very much, Jerry. Thank you so much for the kind words. Really, thank you. I can't, I'm going to choke up, but thank you. Between the video and those kind words, I really appreciate it. Nelson and Michelle, thank you so much. I appreciate this. It's one of the greatest honors in my life, and I really appreciate it. I promise I will earn this and appreciate it. Sorry. Okay, so a long list of people to thank. My parents are here today, and so my mother's crying, so now that's going to make me cry. But I want to start thanking both of you and each of you. You know, my mother taught me to read and write, and it took quite a while to teach. Sorry, to teach me that, and so I really appreciate it. And every day, she would send me off to school with various pieces of advice. You know, the clothes don't make the man. Be good, and if you can't be good at it. That was my favorite. It probably explains a lot, and I really appreciate it. And my father, who taught me the value of hard work and of education. I'm not gonna cry. I'm not gonna cry. So, usually I have PowerPoint to rely on, even if I start crying. And my in-laws are here as well, my mother-in-law and my father-in-law, Becky and Hap Chalmers, and thank you for having me and your family and sharing Annie with me. And my father-in-law pointed out that I Shouldn't be nervous at all because I absolutely have a job until at least 7 p.m. today. And so it's really, and I have that talk on Saturday, so I'm good, at least through then. And as I said, thank you for sharing Annie. She's my best friend and the love of my life. And, I've learned that Nelson and I share a lot in common. We both married women that are much, much smarter than us. And so I really appreciate her advice and love every day. Okay, and so Leo and Bob and Stephen and Jeff and Forrest, thank you for recruiting me. I appreciate it and giving me this opportunity. It's been amazing. This place is a real class act, and I appreciate it. Okay, make sure I've thanked everyone. Probably the most important group of people, Annie and I have 5 children, and as I think everyone knows, 2 of those children have been affected by autism, a boy and a girl. And they couldn't be here today just because they wouldn't let us proceed among the 5 of them. They would be everywhere. But I want to make sure that we thank our sons and daughters, our shared sons and daughters, because I began my career as a basic neuroscientist who intended to study how the human brain understands other humans, and never really cared about its application. It was really just knowledge for knowledge's sake, and frankly, mostly because I liked playing with scanners and taking pictures of the brain and making cool-looking pictures. And so I was going to be doing that and teaching psychology. And it was really my daughter, Frances, that shaped my career into something that's been incredibly, incredibly valuable for me. And, I really enjoy going to work. I probably would have already dropped out of science and opened a coffee shop or something at this point. But I really love going to work every day. So briefly, I want to highlight, we have this vision, and people get endowed chairs, but it usually doesn't come with a team, and I see this as really a team effort and a shared vision, and it's an extraordinary resource. And so the vision that we have really crafted here is to come to Washington, D.C. and build an institute that goes from understanding autism at the level of molecules. I see Josh in the audience and Maturio, and understanding how you can begin to figure out autism at that level, at the level of the cells of the brain, moving up then into the level of analysis that I study in systems neuroscience, and understanding how you can bridge the molecular findings, the genetics, the brain imaging, and then something that we've done only recently, which is to begin to understand how you can link the findings from imaging to applications in research and treatment. So we kind of take that translational model and bring it all together. And while we'll focus on adults, we're interested in the whole lifespan. So for example, Greg, who's in the audience, and I are working on a project where we want to study aging in autism. Why aging? Because we have adults with autism. We'll soon have a true wave of adults. I calculated it the other day, and it was, several million new adults aging into this transition period. And so we have this crisis of what are we going to do to help these adults, these young adults, begin their lives and begin to be the very best individuals that they can be and productive. And that seems like a major problem, but it's really an opportunity where we can match those individuals to unique skill sets. For example, the beautiful drawings that we saw of Dylan's earlier, so that we begin to fill needs that are unmet in the workforce. And so we're very attentive to that, but it also provides the opportunity to begin to do interventions in translation at the level of adults with autism, where we are then using that as an experiment. We try different things, nothing that we think would harm anyone, but new creative things, and then understand from the level of the social context of behavior all the way back down to molecules, how that worked or didn't work. And we're already reaping benefits from this approach. So for example, my colleague Pam Ventola led a paper where, and Daniel, who I see in the audience, where they're able to identify which individuals will benefit from which behavioral interventions. So you take ABA or similar and $30,000 in 16 weeks at 40 hours a week. Later, 60%, if you find a good therapist, of the kids will benefit from it, and 40% won't at all. It'll be a complete waste. So how do we know which kids to begin with? And Daniel and Pam were able to show that we can actually tell you with great certainty, but much more importantly than just saying which kids will benefit, why at the level of neural systems, which then gives somebody like Josh a target to understand in an animal model down to the molecule. And once you have that understanding, you can begin to actually intervene in how the brain is functioning and put them back into therapy. And now it may well work for that individual child. So we don't only mean finding the right therapy for the right individual at the right time, but rather how do we change the therapies to work for the individuals that we meet. And then that relates to my last point, which is it's both important that I decided to focus on this adolescent transition, not just because it's interesting, but this is a second opportunity for plasticity and massive reorganization in the brain. There's a reason why humanity invented colleges for this age group. It isn't because they're done and they're grown and take them out of the oven and send them off. It's because that's an opportunity to affect change. So that's why the age range. Why Washington, D.C.? Well, because if we can do this here, people will people are watching. I probably shouldn't say that in D.C., but people will notice. People at NIH, people across the street, in federal office, our partners in state government in Maryland and Virginia. And if we can do it here, and we can, then we can create a society very rapidly that's much more accepting and adapting to our kids who are going to be going out into the world. And so I have the opportunity to try to contribute to that. And that's what's so exciting about this age group and this place and this time in history, because I think we're actually at the point where we might see real progress in this area in my lifetime. I have 3 years left. So I'll stop there, and thank you again. Appreciate it.
Well, thank you, Kevin. We are inspired by your work, excited about the potential outcomes, and we look forward to a successful career at GW as the Carbonell Family Professor. So this concludes the speaking portion of the program, but I invite you to join Dr. Pelphrey and his family, Dr. Fischbach, Chairman and Mrs. Carbonell, President Knapp, and Provost Maltzman, and myself for a reception upstairs on the 7th floor of the City View Room. You can either take the elevator, there's also stairs right outside, and that'll take you right up to the reception. Thank you all very much for coming. Thank you to the Carbonells. Thank you, Kevin, and thank you all for coming.